Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we're looking at this, the CWWK AIO-T6 6-bay NAS. Now, a few bits of disclaimer and backstory before we go any further, because you might not be aware and wondering why I have got what looks like one of the ugliest packed boxes ever here on the desk. So, a little bit of backstory for you. For the last month and a half, we've been looking at the Storaxa Kickstarter NAS, a series that we're going to be doing a video on every month until summer 2023, when the device is hopefully going to ship, and we've got a lot of backers that are following that, wanting to know how that story is going to end, for good or for bad. But early coverage of that Kickstarter here on the channel, but in the majority of the case on websites like Server the Home and lots of Reddit communities, we're very keen to highlight that a lot of the hardware that was being utilised in some form or another, but in particular the Mobo inside, was actually available via another product on another Chinese retailing site as well as AliExpress. And that is this. The company Changwang released several different Mobo, like kind of small server boards, mini PC built systems, and a 6-bay NAS system running on an Intel Pentium processor with an internal SSD that will either arrive pre-installed or with an option of the likes of UnRAID, TrueNAS, Open Media Vault and more, and available at a comically low price. And as I mentioned in a previous video on the Storaxa, me and Eddie here thought, do you know what, screw it, we're just going to buy one and let you guys see the difference, because if we're going to cover that whole Storaxa Kickstarter thing right the way through to completion, we need to have some sense of objectivity and reflection on what this kind of solution pre-built can actually be like. Now, this is not the Storaxa. It doesn't have the Wi-Fi 6 and the antennas. This is a 6-bay NAS. We'll talk about the hardware and specifications in a bit, and this video is predominantly going to be featuring the hardware. We will be booting it up to have a little look about the initial setup OS, and in a follow-up video we're going to go into a greater degree of detail about software running on this device. But for now, this video is about seeing the quality level of this product inside and out. So we picked it up on AliExpress for £397. We didn't pay any additional tax when it arrived here in the UK. Delivery took around about 9 to 10 days from the moment we ordered it. It was the 8 gig model with an UnRAID license included, apparently, something we'll check on, underline that for apparently for now. Quad-core Pentium Silver processor inside, and 8 gig of DDR4 memory. It also arrives with 128 gig SSD, which has got the software pre-loaded there, and it's a 6-bay system. And the reason I've got it in this horrific packaging is this is what it was shipped in. This is what it looked like when it arrived, and I've not opened it yet. So I thought it would be interesting to get some live reaction to see just what the content is going to look like. So let's grab ourselves a handy pair of scissors and very dangerously open this box. Now, I genuinely have no idea what to expect inside here. Maybe it'll be a lovely pretty retail box. Maybe it'll be bare bones and there'll be nothing in there. Maybe I'll open it and I'll, you know, someone will jump out and punch me in the face. We'll find out what's inside. If someone is in there, that's an impressively small box. So for now, open it, and we're also hoping that the content of this box, this is the right way up. So hopefully we can get in there that way. Open that up. Again, apologies for this being so close to the microphone, but I thought you'd like to see exactly what you're going to get if you go for one of these boxes. Over there. So inside, it looks like we do have a retail box inside. So let's get that on the desk. Man alive, they took no prisoners there. There is our box, and straight away, it is so generic, so unlisted, it's unreal. Again, it's a cheap box we bought on AliExpress. What did we expect? So let's get this open and see what we get inside. So again, we open it up. We've got our accessory box, so let's go through our accessories first. Inside, we have got an external PSU. That really surprised me. I thought this would be an internal PSU there. So again, let's have a little look. What is our power rating on here? And this is a 120 watt external PSU there. We've also got our UK mains lead, so again they did include the right regional lead. We've got screws here for presumably the 3.5-inch media. We've got a USB key that's been sort of thrown in the corner, and it's a SanDisk in there. I assume it's 32 or 16 gig. Let's have a little look. We'll have to find it out when we boot it up. Then we've got the product manual here. So let's have a little look about what our product manual is. And as we can see, it is totally the wrong product there. Yes, it's presumably that same Mobo inside, but that is not the image of the unit we were talking about. So they clearly reused the product manual there of the smaller form factor mini PC that we've seen listed on that site. We've also got a QC certificate here, but it is pretty much all in Chinese with no English therefore. So again, there is our box. We'll leave out the USB. We won't need the screws yet because we're only going to do a boot. Leave that out. And now we can have a little look at the unit itself. So we've got an additional layer of foam. Quite soft foam, but not terrible. At least it's well protected. Again, they could have really cut some corners on that one. Inside, we've got the unit in quite a loose bag. Again, not really going to critique it, that's fine. We've got more foam there at the bottom. Pop that over there. Now have a little look about the build quality of this and the design of this device. So, straight away, for a 6-bay, that's pretty darn compact, really. To put that into perspective, we've got some 4-bay, we've got the Synology 4-bay up there. So let's pop that next to that, and we can see for a 6-bay, pretty small in terms of that size difference there, side by side between that and the 4-bay. If we bring that closer up there, you can have a little closer look for it. Maybe get the thumbnail sorted. That was easy. But I think for now, what we should do is get our screwdriver and get that ready and have a closer look at the design of this device. So the external chassis is metal all the way around. I will say the lack of an internal PSU is going to help those temperatures a little bit there. The fans, you know, they're not really removable there, the fans there on the rear. There is ventilation there on the side panel where I can make out the internal SSD just on the side. There's another ventilation panel there on that side. The main storage bays, it's actually not that hideous. I know that seems like an odd observation, but I would have thought I was going to rag on this device and talk about how much I don't like the design, but it's actually not too shabby. I really hate seagulls today. 1 minute, let's get rid of you. So moving forward between it, we can talk about the front there. We've got a USB port there. I believe the USB ports on this are USB 3.2 Gen 1, so 5 gigabits per second there, which is a bit of a shame. No LCD panel and not even an area to install an LCD panel on this device. I will say the brushed metal front panel is making the lighting in the studio create a real havoc moment here for trying to film this device. If we have a little look at the individual bays, and let's have a quick look at one of these. So how do we unlock? Are they spring-loaded? They are spring-loaded trays. They're metal all the way through. So we've got 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch bays there. Quite a decent amount of ventilation. Fair play to them there. Again, we'll have to see the noise level of this thing when we boot it up for the first time. And again, they're not key lockable trays. So that might be a shame for some people out there. Again, depending on the storage software you use, we can't really critique this in terms of software. I am going to obviously boot it up to see that UnRAID license there. But still, nonetheless, at least we've got some base level software apparently. So if we remove all of these bays, and look, they do feel quite sturdy going in there. They don't feel too cheap. They're quite a nice texture there. And they are slotting out quite rigidly. They don't feel very loose all the way along. We have a dividing bracket along the middle between the two. I will say, the inside of this device is absolutely filthy all the way along the top. And I know that's an incredibly minor point there, but I will say that that board inside is not the cleanest along the main panels. Again, very minor, and at least at the back we've got those combined data and power, and at least the controller board itself is actually in quite good clean maintenance. It's lacking any ventilation around the sides though, I will say. There's a tiny bit of ventilation on the bottom, and obviously behind this main controller board at the back are our fans. but the ventilation could be better on this system, and that little dividing wall between the two of them, whether that is for structural reasons or to kind of direct airflow, I'm not sure, but I'm not as convinced by the ventilation on this device compared with some of the other devices we've talked about here on the channel previously. Again, in terms of storage, almost certainly you're going to be able to use any SATA drive inside this, because again, it's going to come down to the software you use. If it's UnRAID, you kind of pay a subscription based on the drive numbers you've got there. We'll be checking what that UnRAID license includes with this device when you buy it for AliExpress at that price. And I will say with the individual bays, if there's 6 bays, there better be 6 drives worth of license there, because that will really be annoying. But for now, let's make our way onto the back and start talking about the ports and connections. Now, one thing I will say about the T6 is, in terms of most 6-bay and even 4-bay NASs I've talked about here on the channel for the last 2 or 3 years, the ports and connections on this thing are wild. They're very, very different. And if you do look online about Changwang and a lot of the solutions in the CWWK catalog, there is a varied degree of ports, connections, and indeed CPU and memory options open to you online. It's still, frankly, a very budget solution, and clearly because they're producing only the hardware and just porting on the software, there's a lot of economies to be made there, available both to them and to the end user. But still, regardless of my negative or positive feelings, the connections are wild. So firstly, we have got 4 Ethernet LAN connections. They are all 2.5 GBE. It's got 4 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports there on the rear. And again, we can't really discuss things like link aggregation or SMB multi-channel or any of that kind of stuff, because it's going to depend on the software you're choosing to use there, and whether you're going to use something like Proxmox and run more than one OS within the system, and then maybe some networking software on the side, and like kind of side-wired with your NAS software as well, or your multimedia one. And we'll highlight as well, we have 2 USB 2 ports there on the bottom, which are really, really boring, and they're USB 2 ports, which presumably are to be used in conjunction with the HDMI output there, which is good news, but still nonetheless, the HDMI and those USB 2 ports means that we've only really got one USB 3 port to play with on this device, and no one-touch copy or anything like that. I will highlight there is both an HDMI port there, an HDMI 2.0, 4K 60 frames port, but there's also a display port, something I've never seen on most of the kind of turnkey hardware software combined solutions in the market. How useful that is, I would debate, but at least it's there, I guess. I'm just not sure anyone's going to be using that over HDMI on the application deployment of this. Again, the fans, you can't access the fans for cleaning or maintenance without largely taking the whole chassis apart, which for some is going to be annoying, particularly when you factor in, as I mentioned earlier on, the ventilation in this. I think there is a good degree of ventilation on this for a budget solution there. There's nothing on the base, but it's some odd choices being made internally about the airflow, which I have certain question marks over. For now though, what I'm going to do is grab myself a screwdriver. I'm going to start making my way inside this NAS. So now I'm going to start making my way in. I've got my little screwdriver there. We've got kind of standard PC case rules here. We've got 4 screws either corner on the inside cover there. Again, one thing that's going to be interesting to see is what kind of SSD this is actually built included with, because I've purchased that 128 gig SSD, but they don't detail anywhere online the SSD they're going to be using. Is it an unbranded job or something we know about? Maybe an unbranded WD like we've seen before, and moreover, what gen is that SSD going to be in the slot that it's in? It's going to be NVMe like 3x1 on a bottleneck. That's something that only the software delving in the next video will be able to truly find out. Also, the memory being used. I know the CPU inside this system, this Pentium does not support ECC memory, so I never would have assumed it would arrive with ECC memory, but nonetheless it's going to be interesting to see in terms of internal hardware what they have included. So there is the external chassis. We can slide that off. Again, it doesn't feel great, ladies and gentlemen. It's a nicely put together casing there. It's quite sturdy. But I'm not going to lie to you and say that didn't feel really shaky taking that off of there. Let's move that down there and take a little look at the guts and the nuts and the bolts of this device. So it looks like they're at the top with power running in, and we've got quite a lot of power going straight in. At the top there, we've got our main board there for managing the multi-lanes on that storage. There's our storage controller there at the top. Not only can you see the clear power connectors going into the top, and there should be photos in an article linked below, but also you've got that power running straight in there. So there's definitely a power management there running into those main backboards for the drives there at the base. If we look at the side, we can get a good look at the main guts and controller board of this system. So immediately we've got the individual SATA connectors for each of those drives. Underneath there, we've got our 2 sodium connectors, and inside the the memory that we're utilizing, and I'll bring that nice and close for you there. The memory we're using is the Indelinx DDR4 2666 megahertz memory. I have never heard of that brand. Shocking. The SSD at the top again is called Fast Speed or FA Speed. Again, I have never heard of that SSD brand, and obviously after this video I will be researching these parts quite a lot to figure out just what the hell they are. The other thing I'll highlight is, as you can see inside there, is not only do we have an additional couple of USB ports. I don't know how well you can make that out. I'm going to have to get my finger there. Just above my finger there, we've got a couple of USB ports there, but also seemingly very poorly taped down sensors there inside, presumably for sensing the system's temperature and alerting it and acting accordingly. But it's not very well put together, and certainly the main board, you can see for all 6 of those bays going into a SATA controller, is mounted on an M2 PCB, with that M2 PCB filling up another one of those slots. That's why we've only got the one M2 to play with there. So I'm going to be really intrigued to figure out what exactly the architecture is inside this in our follow-up video, when we go into a lot more detail and update, of course, the article below. But the next thing I'm going to do now is get all of this put back together, and we're going to plug this device in and take a good look at what exactly the OS boot is on this device. Does it mount immediately from that drive? Are we going to need to go in with a KVM? Do we need this as a recovery drive here with this included, or is this required during initialization? So what I'm going to do is get this put back together and boot this up to see what exactly this provides in terms of day one software, given they're just porting the software and not really supporting it in any way. Okay, so here we are, we've got the device set up. There is our device there. You can hear the PSU banging around there on the table at the back. And what we're going to do is just test the initialization of the device. So we're going to check that we've got UnRAID on board, and it does indeed include that license there. We have got the USB key that the device arrives with. So we've got to make sure we've got that in the first time we set this device up, so it can perform the initialization. So we've already checked, and the OS is not on the NVMe by default. You do have to perform that initialization with that USB first thing. Another thing I will highlight is, remember, there are no drives inside this device. We are only checking initialization and that software there. So although it isn't going to have hard drives inside, we are still going to be noise testing it a bit, because I think this device already seems like something that's going to make a decent amount of noise on its own, given its metal chassis. And we've got the microphone here about 1.5 feet away from it that I'm utilizing right now. So although it's not really representative of the noise you might hear when you're like a few meters away from it, I did want to bring that mic in a little closer to get some authentic noise of the system sans drives. This is going to be the noise of the system with no drives inside, so we're removing that from the equation entirely there. But I'm going to pop that down there. We've also got that USB as mentioned. Just going to install that in the back. We've also got our USB key here that we're going to be utilising on the graphical user interface. Bear in mind, there you can see on screen, that is the HDMI output. We're using a capture card there, right there in the background. So again, you're seeing what I am seeing, but obviously I'm presumably at some corner of the screen for you guys to see. And I guess nothing left to do but boot the device. So let's see, first boot, what happens. Okay, so we're getting the beep. We've loaded into the Mobo. I'm just going to bring that camera down slightly. You can see the device. And immediately we have got the OS boot there at the background for the choice. Presumably that's from the USB. So we're not going to touch anything. We're just going to let the device run straight into that OS booting from the USB. And immediately, that is not a quiet fan. I'm just going to give that a second. Cool. So that was an initial spin up, but even then, that is not a quiet fan. Now bear in mind this is a 2-fan system. It doesn't have any drives inside, and this is initialization, so a lot of this might come down to initial fan speeding and fan testing there at the background. And once the OS is installed, there is every possibility it'll be a far more dynamic and reactive boot there in the background. But as we can see, we've got that going through bit by bit. Hopefully we'll make our way into the boot manager there, so we can roll into the boot of UnRAID, see if it goes into the initialization manager, or a pre-configured boot of UnRAID that's been duped onto multiple USBs. As you can see, we've got our login there. So what I'm going to do is not only go ahead with the login there, I'm going to check utilizing a local tool that you probably won't see on screen because the way I've set this out on the capture. I'm just going to do a scan of the local network using advanced IP scanner just to see where this device has appeared online. Again, you can't see that right now. What I'm going to do is fast forward to the completion of the network scan and then hopefully get that there on screen for you, because there'll be a better understanding of that first time boot with this device. Right, so as you can see, we've had to rejig some stuff around the screen. The top right of the screen there has got the HDMI output coming through on the HDMI. It might be coming through a little bit compressed for you there, but I just wanted to keep that on screen, because at the same time, what we also have on the desktop of my laptop here, connecting via the network, is the UnRAID configuration there, the initialization tool. I utilized the IP scanner to find the device on the network, and again, much like most UnRAID installations, you can manage the whole thing via the command line there above me, but it is recommended to patch in via the network connection there, as you can see. So you don't really need the HDMI output, but I wanted to include that in there. The noise of the device has gone down a little, but there is definitely persistent fan noise there. So let's get rid of that IP scanner there. As you can see, we've got the root. I'm going to try and move that around. So what we might do is just very quickly move that to another corner where it's not being super annoying there. Right, so switching over to my desktop in full here, we can take a closer look at the UnRAID software. Now, first and foremost, this is not a review of UnRAID. I've touched on that already, I've said it before, but it's just important to note. This is completely open source software that I do strongly recommend you use. Indeed, we've got another whole series on UnRAID, as well as 2 more parts on the series with this device. This is not about judging this device in conjunction with UnRAID. It's not fair, because UnRAID in itself is a whole different beast. But what I will add while looking through this in, again, you can start to really get the permeation of that noise of the device while it's running, is you aren't getting a fully fledged key with this device. You're getting the OS on that USB that you're lumping there in the back, and then boom, you're up and running. But you're most certainly not getting UnRAID with a license included from what I'm seeing here. I popped the USB into my laptop here to see if there was an included key. I didn't find one, which again just goes on to explain why I'm slightly dubious about it. I also contacted CWWK for more information on the installation of this, basically seeing if they would give me a key. They won't include a key with this device, and that again was via AliExpress. So again, me saying to them, you said it included a key, but is there a key that I'm not getting? Wasn't included there. I will say, in terms of the hardware, you are getting the hardware that they promise, although arguably very convoluted messaging on the CWWK AliExpress page, with assets being pulled from different solutions all the way through their whole portfolio there. Very conflicting information there. But I will state that although I am connecting to the device via 1 GBE connection, ergo, as you can see there at the bottom, it is noting a 1000 megs connection. I have looked into it, and it is a 2.5G connection on that network there on the rear. Taking a closer look at that hardware, we can go into the settings menu there, find out more information about what we've got. Again, you've got the usual network management, you've got all of the tools that are built into UnRAID. We're not going to give this device any kind of credit for that, because it's not like they built UnRAID. They are selling this with that software pre-installed. But you can find out more information about the hardware layout of the device, that 8 gig that was included with it. The M2 NVMe inside, they're not really using for anything right now, but we can port or do some failover with the OS if we choose to. And you know, it is UnRAID, it is included, and it's probably as close as a number of us will get to getting a turnkey solution, buy off the shelf, that includes UnRAID. It just happens to also have an unregistered copy of UnRAID on there that you're going to have to go to the trouble of either getting your 30-day trial or use your existing UnRAID license if you choose to. On top of that, while we're looking at the device's hardware architecture there, we can see that, you know, we can run wherever we want. If we go ahead and we can install the community apps plugin there, it will allow us to start utilizing all of the features and services that we would like to use within UnRAID. They're all included. This device has enough power in order to do everything we need to do. It's just, you can't help but feel that what you're getting is a slightly incomplete experience, and arguably the selling on that CWW page is very misleading there. And I think that's one of the big problems people have about this middle ground between DIY solutions where they're going to build their own thing and then stick on some open source software and spend their time with TrueNAS, OpenVault, UnRAID and building their own, or opting for NAS solutions from brands like Synology or QNAP that are pre-built, pre-software included as complete solutions. This middle ground that this thing is trying to perpetuate and fill to give you a turnkey ready to go solution, but with the open source software kind of saving you half the time, only really works, in my opinion, if the software you're getting is ready to go and doesn't require further license purchases included and rolled in with the price. And that doesn't seem to be the case here. And we know, as we follow that other prominent middle ground DIY open source turnkey solution, Storax, it's going to be interesting to see where they fall in terms of the software being included. If it was TrueNAS, you're not going to think about a licensing, it's all included. But with UnRAID, there is that question mark about whether they're going to include any kind of licenses for those available drives. And with that system having 5 drives, 5 hard drive bays and all those SSD bays, and this system having these 6, it's just a bit of a shame that it's not included. Overall, I can't really fault the internal hardware. I will say the production quality does feel bashed out, certainly. When you're looking at this device, if I lift it up slightly there's no hard drives inside, so I don't have to worry too much. I will say overall that the hardware quality, it's got some sharp edges to it. It feels rushed, definitely feels kind of smashed out case that, you know, we can stick anything in. It does lack any kind of personality, but if you're looking for an unbranded box, you're not really going to go wrong. I'm not too keen on the placement of the PSU. If I move that around the back, being at the top right, I sort of hate that. And the fans on this device, they don't get very quiet. That metal chassis that we're surrounding this device with, it's definitely making the system get pretty hot all the way through for that heat dissipation. You're not feeling the efficiency. Remember, there's no drives in this. This shouldn't be as warm as it is. It's not burning hot, but I'm definitely aware of the heat. For a system with no drives inside, it's noisier than it should be, and certainly that heat being generated. Yes, I could go into UnRAID, do a few configurations there, lower those fans, do a couple of temp checks, and we can see the temperature of both the drive and the system as a whole, but I'm still not really feeling that what we're seeing here is a quality product. But again, that's kind of the whole point. But this is part 1 of a 3-part series on the T6. I am looking forward to doing more on this when we start putting some other OSs on this. So come doing some of those sideload 2 OSs on there with Proxmox, and finding out more about this device, this new growing sector between complete turnkey hardware software and DIY open source, this new one in the middle. But if you've got any questions or tests you want to see performed on this device, and we will be digging in with Putty on the next video, do let me know. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed part 1. Stay tuned for the channel to learn more. Questions below, hopefully an article with all the pictures in the video as well, and I'll see you next time.